The glittering trap. The chandeliers of the Metropolitan Hotel ballroom cast dancing shadows across the marble floor, their crystal teardrops catching the light like frozen moments of brilliance. Sophia Chen adjusted the delicate strap of her midnight blue dress, the silk fabric whispering against her skin as she moved through the crowd of elegantly dressed guests. The annual Children's Hope Foundation Gala was in full swing, and the air hummed with sophisticated conversation, clinking champagne flutes, and the gentle melody of a string quartet positioned near the grand staircase. She had been looking forward to this evening for weeks. Marcus had surprised her with the invitation, claiming he wanted to show her off to his colleagues and friends. "You deserve to be seen," he had said, his charming smile making her heart flutter. After 3 years together, she still felt that familiar warmth when he looked at her with what she thought was genuine affection. Tonight felt like a milestone, a public declaration of their relationship's importance. But as Sophia scanned the room, searching for Marcus's familiar figure among the sea of tuxedos and evening gowns, an uncomfortable knot began forming in her stomach. He had disappeared 20 minutes ago, claiming he needed to network with some potential clients. She had offered to accompany him, but he had waved her off with a casual, "Enjoy the party, babe," and melted into the crowd. The ballroom was a masterpiece of old-world elegance. Towering columns wrapped in ivory silk supported a ceiling painted with cherubs and gold leaf details that seemed to shimmer with each flicker of candlelight. Round tables draped in crisp white linens dotted the space, each centerpiece a carefully arranged bouquet of white roses and baby's breath. The wealthy elite of the city mingled effortlessly, their laughter creating a soundtrack of privilege and comfort. Sophia sipped her champagne, the bubbles tickling her throat as she watched. Couples glide across the dance floor. She had always loved events like this. The glamour, the sophistication, the way everyone seemed to embody their best selves for one magical evening. Her marketing background had taught her to appreciate the careful orchestration required to create such seamless elegance, from the perfectly coordinated lighting to the strategically placed ice sculptures that never seemed to melt. A burst of laughter from across the room caught her attention, and her blood turned to ice water in her veins. There, near the ornate bar carved from imported Italian marble, stood Marcus. But he wasn't alone, and he wasn't networking with clients. His arms were wrapped around a stunning redhead in an emerald green dress that hugged every curve of her model-thin frame. Sophia recognized her immediately. Victoria Summers, Marcus's ex-girlfriend from college, the one he claimed meant nothing to him anymore. But the embrace they shared told a different story entirely. Sophia watched, frozen, as Marcus tilted Victoria's chin up with his finger, the same gesture he had used on her countless times. The intimate familiarity of the movement made her stomach lurch. Victoria's laugh was musical, practiced, and she leaned into Marcus as if no time had passed since their breakup 2 years ago. Other guests had begun to notice, their conversations quieting as they turned to observe the reunion unfolding before them. Then Marcus's eyes found hers across the crowded room. For a moment, time seemed suspended like the crystal drops above their heads. His expression didn't show surprise or guilt. Instead, she saw something calculating, almost triumphant. He wanted her to see this. This wasn't an accidental encounter or a moment of weakness. This was deliberate, orchestrated, meant to provoke a reaction. Their gazes locked for what felt like an eternity, but lasted only seconds. Marcus's lips curved into that familiar half-smile she had once found irresistible, but now it looked cruel, predatory. Without breaking eye contact, he leaned down and pressed his lips to Victoria's in a kiss that was unmistakably passionate, unmistakably public, and unmistakably meant for Sophia to witness. The champagne glass trembled in Sophia's hand, the delicate crystal threatening to shatter under the pressure of her grip. Around her, the party continued its elegant dance. Waiters glided between tables with silver trays, couples swayed to the music, and conversation flowed like the expensive wine being poured at every table. But for Sophia, everything had narrowed to this single devastating moment. She could feel the eyes of other guests beginning to turn her way, their expressions ranging from pity to curiosity to barely concealed gossip hunger. Heat rose in her cheeks, but not from embarrassment, from an anger that burned slow and steady, like coals in a carefully tended fire. Marcus expected her to crumble, to rush over and make a scene, to beg for his attention and fight for his affection like some desperate broken thing. But Sophia Chen had not clawed her way up from a working-class neighborhood and built a successful career by breaking easily. She had not survived the corporate world's casual cruelties and systematic underestimations by being the kind of woman who fell apart in public. The hurt was real, sharp and immediate, cutting through her chest like shards of the very crystal that illuminated this beautiful, terrible evening. But beneath the pain, something else was stirring, something Marcus had clearly miscalculated. She set her champagne glass down on a nearby table with deliberate precision, the soft clink barely audible above the music. Her spine straightened, her shoulders squared, and she lifted her chin with the same regal bearing her grandmother had taught her years ago. "Dignity," the old woman had always said, "is the one thing no one can take from you unless you give it away." Tonight, Sophia decided she would not be giving anything away. The unexpected ally. The terrace doors beckoned like an escape route, their glass panels reflecting the warm glow of the ballroom's chandeliers against the cool darkness beyond. Sophia moved toward them with measured steps, refusing to hurry, despite every instinct screaming at her to flee. The evening air would be crisp against her heated skin, a balm for the burning sensation that had settled in her chest like swallowed fire. But before she could reach sanctuary, a gentle voice stopped her in her tracks. "Excuse me, but I believe you dropped this." Sophia turned to find a tall man in an impeccably tailored charcoal grey tuxedo extending his hand toward her. In his palm lay a small silver earring, not hers, she realized immediately, but she found herself curious about this stranger's approach. His face was angular but kind, with intelligent dark eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses that gave him a scholarly appearance. His black hair was slightly mussed, as if he'd been running his fingers through it, and there was something refreshingly genuine about his slightly crooked smile. "I'm afraid that's not mine," Sophia said softly, surprised by how steady her voice sounded despite the storm raging inside her chest. "But thank you for thinking of me." The man's smile widened, and he pocketed the earring with a sheepish expression. "James Wellington," he said, extending his hand properly this time. "And you're absolutely right. I may have fabricated the earring situation. I'm an architect, not a jewelry detective. I just thought you might need a friendly face right about now." Despite everything, Sophia found herself almost smiling. There was something disarming about his honesty, a refreshing contrast to the calculated cruelty she had just witnessed. "Sophia Chen," she replied, accepting his handshake. His grip was warm and steady, the hands of someone who built things rather than tore them down. "I saw what happened over there," James said quietly, his tone carrying genuine concern rather than gossipy curiosity. "And I have to say, the way you handled that was remarkable. Most people would have either made a scene or fallen apart completely. You did neither." Sophia's defenses bristled slightly. "You were watching me?" "Not intentionally," James replied quickly, raising his hands in a gesture of innocence. "I was trying to avoid the bar area myself. My ex-business partner is holding court over there, telling anyone who will listen about how he discovered my architectural vision. Sometimes these charity events feel more like minefields than celebrations. The comparison drew a genuine smile from Sophia, the first real one she had felt all evening. Minefields disguised as ballrooms. That's quite an apt description. "Would you like to step outside for some air?" James asked, nodding toward the terrace doors. "I promise I'm not trying to be presumptuous. I just thought you might appreciate a moment away from the audience." Sophia glanced back toward the bar area, where Marcus was still performing his reunion with Victoria, their dramatic embrace now accompanied by what appeared to be serious conversation. Several guests continued to steal glances in her direction, waiting to see how the abandoned girlfriend would react. The weight of their expectations felt suffocating. "Actually, yes," she said, surprising herself with the decision. "Some air sounds perfect." The terrace was a masterpiece of landscape architecture, with carefully manicured gardens stretching out into the darkness beyond strategically placed lighting. Stone balustrades overlooked the city's glittering skyline, and intimate seating. Areas were tucked between planters filled with late-blooming roses. The temperature was perfect for the silk dress that had felt so appropriate hours ago when she had chosen it with such care. "Much better," James said, as they walked toward the balustrade, the sounds of the party muffled by the glass doors behind them. "I always feel like I can think more clearly, with some space to breathe." "You're not what I expected," Sophia admitted, leaning against the cool stone and looking out at the city lights below. "Most men at these events are either trying to impress me with their portfolios or wondering if I'm worth their time based on my dress size." James laughed, a warm sound that seemed to ease some of the tension in Sophia's shoulders. "Well, I'm definitely not going to comment on your dress size, though I will say that blue is clearly your color. As for my portfolio, I'd rather hear about yours. What do you do when you're not gracefully handling public humiliation at charity galas?" "Marketing executive," Sophia replied, then found herself elaborating in a way she hadn't expected. "I specialize in brand recovery, helping companies rebuild their image after scandals or setbacks. Ironic, considering I apparently needed to rebuild my own image tonight. From where I'm standing, your image doesn't need any rebuilding," James said seriously. "What I witnessed in there was someone who knows exactly who she is, even when someone she cared about tried to make her forget." The words hit deeper than Sophia had anticipated. She had spent so many months, maybe even years, subtly adjusting herself to fit Marcus's expectations, softening her opinions to avoid conflicts, making herself smaller to make him feel larger. When had she stopped recognizing her own strength? "He wanted me to make a scene," she said quietly, voicing the realization that had been crystallizing in her mind. "He wanted me to fight for him, to prove that I couldn't live without him. And instead, you proved something entirely different," James observed. "You proved that you could." A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the distant sounds of traffic and the muted music from the ballroom. Sophia found herself studying James's profile as he gazed out at the city. There was something solid about him, grounded in a way that Marcus had never been. Marcus was all flash and charm, adaptable to whatever would serve him best in any given moment. James seemed like someone who knew who he was and wasn't interested in being anyone else. "Can I ask you something?" Sophia said suddenly. "Why did you approach me? I mean, really, you don't even know me." James turned to face her fully, his expression thoughtful. "Honestly, because I recognized something in the way you stood there. I went through my own public humiliation about a year ago when my business partner tried to steal credit for our biggest project. There was a moment in that boardroom when I had to decide who I was going to be. Someone who fought dirty to match his tactics, or someone who walked away with my integrity intact. Which did you choose?" "I walked away. started my own firm, took some of our best clients with me, and designed 3 buildings that are probably going to win awards next year. But in that moment, standing in that boardroom, I felt exactly like, you look tonight, like I was being tested to see what I was really made of. Sophia felt something shift inside her chest, a loosening of the tight knot that had formed when she first saw Marcus with Victoria. And what were you made of? James's smile was self-deprecating but confident, apparently stronger stuff than I thought. Just like you. The terrace doors opened behind them, and the sound of laughter and conversation spilled out into the night. Sophia tensed, expecting to see Marcus coming to find her, to continue whatever game he was playing. Instead, it was an elderly couple seeking their own moment of quiet conversation. "We should probably go back in," James said, noticing her reaction. "But before we do, would you like to dance? There's a smaller gathering in the adjacent room. Less dramatic, more actual charity focus." Sophia looked at him in surprise. "You want to dance with me? I want to spend more time talking to someone who reminds me that there are still people in this world who choose grace over games," James replied simply. "Plus, I'm told I'm not terrible at the waltz, and it seems like you could use a partner who isn't trying to manipulate you." For the first time all evening, Sophia felt genuinely wanted rather than possessed, appreciated rather than owned. The feeling was intoxicating in its simplicity. "James Wellington," she said, extending her hand with a smile that reached her eyes, "I would be honored to dance with you." As they walked back toward the ballroom, Sophia caught a glimpse of Marcus still performing his reunion with Victoria, still glancing toward the spot where he had expected to find her, broken and pleading. But she was no longer there. And she was no longer the same woman who had been standing there an hour ago. She was someone entirely new, walking toward the music with a man who saw her worth without needing to diminish anyone else to prove it. The power shift. The adjacent ballroom was indeed smaller, more intimate, with softer lighting that cast a golden glow over couples moving in slow, graceful circles across the polished floor. A jazz trio had replaced the string quartet there, music flowing like honey through the warm air. Sophia found herself relaxing into James's arms as they swayed to the melody, his hand steady and respectful against her back, his conversation flowing as naturally as their movement. "Tell me about your most challenging brand recovery case," James said, as they turned slowly, his voice pitched low enough that their conversation remained private, despite the other dancers around them. Sophia considered the question, surprised by how much she wanted to share with this virtual stranger. A tech startup whose CEO was caught embezzling funds meant for employee health care. The board wanted to distance themselves completely, pretend he never existed, erase 3 years of company history. But you had a different approach? I convinced them to own it entirely. We created a campaign called Building Better, acknowledging the betrayal, compensating the affected employees publicly, and turning the company into a model of transparency and ethical leadership. They're now valued at 10 times what they were before the scandal. James's eyes lit up with genuine interest. You turned their biggest weakness into their greatest strength. That's brilliant. The admiration in his voice was so different from Marcus's usual dismissive comments about her work. Marcus had always made her feel like her success was somehow less important than his, that marketing was just pretty words, while investment banking was real business. But James spoke to her like an equal, like her mind was something worth exploring, rather than something to be managed or contained. They were in the middle of discussing the psychology of public trust when a familiar voice interrupted their conversation. "Excuse me, I'm so sorry to intrude." Both Sophia and James turned to find Victoria Summers standing at the edge of the dance floor, her emerald dress now slightly wrinkled, her carefully applied lipstick smudged. Up close, she was even more striking than Sophia had realized. Tall and willowy with the kind of bone structure that photographed beautifully, But there was something in her expression that Sophia hadn't expected. Vulnerability, and what looked distinctly like regret. "Victoria," Sophia said evenly, her voice carefully controlled, despite the way her heart rate spiked at the confrontation she had been dreading. "Could I speak with you privately?" Victoria asked, her hands twisting together in a gesture that seemed at odds with her poised exterior. "Please. I know I have no right to ask, but it's important." James stepped slightly closer to Sophia, not possessively, but protectively. "Is this something you want to do?" he asked quietly, his concern evident. Sophia studied Victoria's face, searching for signs of the calculated malice she expected to find. Instead, she saw something that looked remarkably like shame. Her curiosity overrode her caution. "It's fine," she told James. "Could you give us a moment?" "I'll be right over there," he said, nodding toward the bar. "Take all the time you need." Victoria watched him go with an expression that might have been envy. "He seems like a good man," she said once they were alone. "He is," Sophia replied simply. "What did you want to talk about?" Victoria took a deep breath, her shoulders sagging, slightly as if she were releasing a burden she had been carrying all evening. "I wanted to apologize and to tell you the truth about what happened tonight." "The truth?" Sophia kept her voice neutral, though inside she felt a familiar stirring of the investigative instincts that made her so good at her job. "Marcus called me 3 days ago," Victoria said, her words coming out in a rush as if she'd been rehearsing. "Them. He said he wanted to see me, that he missed what we had. I was flattered, I won't lie about that. We had something intense in college, and when it ended it left questions unanswered." Sophia waited, sensing there was more to the story. "But tonight, when we were talking, when he was touching me and making sure you could see—" Victoria's voice cracked slightly. "He kept looking over at you, watching for your reaction, and I realized I wasn't there because he wanted me. I was there because he wanted to hurt you." The words hit Sophia like a physical blow, not because they were surprising, but because having her suspicions confirmed made Marcus's cruelty feel even more deliberate and calculated. "He used me," Victoria continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "And he used you. But the difference is, I let myself be used because I thought I wanted him back. You didn't deserve any of this." Sophia studied Victoria's face, searching for deception, but finding only raw honesty. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've been the other woman before, and I've been the woman being replaced before, and neither one feels good. But being used as a weapon against another woman, that feels worse than both." Victoria's green eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I'm a fashion designer. I create beautiful things. I don't want to be part of destroying them." A long moment of silence stretched between them as Sophia processed this unexpected turn. Around them, couples continued to dance, their movements creating a gentle rhythm that seemed to underscore the strange intimacy of this conversation. "What did you tell him?" Sophia asked finally. "That I wasn't interested in being part of whatever game he was playing, that if he wanted to end things with you, he should do it honestly, instead of trying to manipulate you into ending it yourself." Victoria's laugh was bitter. "He didn't take it well. I imagine not." Sophia found herself almost smiling despite the situation. "Marcus doesn't like it when people don't play their assigned roles in his dramas." "No, he doesn't." Victoria paused, seeming to gather courage for her next words. "There's something else you should know. This isn't the first time he's done this. When we were together in college, he pulled the same stunt with his ex before me. Made a big show of reconciling with her to make me jealous, to test my commitment." The revelation settled over Sophia like a piece of a puzzle clicking into place. The pattern of behavior, the calculated nature of Marcus's cruelty. It wasn't personal to her. It was just who he was, how he operated in relationships. The knowledge should have been devastating, but instead it felt oddly liberating. "You're telling me this was never about love," Sophia said slowly. "It was about control." "Everything with Marcus is about control," Victoria confirmed. "And when he feels like he's losing it, he escalates. Tonight was just the beginning." Sophia looked across the room to where James was waiting patiently at the bar, occasionally glancing in their direction with concern, but respecting the space she had asked for. The contrast between the two men was stark. One who sought to control through manipulation and drama, another who offered support without conditions or expectations. "Thank you," Sophia said to Victoria, meaning it, "for telling me the truth. It couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't," Victoria admitted. "But I keep thinking about the woman I was in college, how I let Marcus's games make me doubt myself and act against my own values. I didn't want to be responsible for doing that to someone else." "What will you tell him?" Victoria's smile was sharp and determined. "That I have better things to do than audition for the role of weapon in his relationship wars, and that he seriously underestimated both of us." As if summoned by their conversation, Marcus appeared at the entrance to the smaller ballroom, his eyes scanning the room until they found the two women standing together. His expression shifted from confusion to alarm as he realized that his carefully orchestrated plan had gone completely off script. "Speak of the devil," Victoria murmured, following Sophia's gaze. Sophia watched Marcus approach, but instead of the familiar flutter of anxiety she expected to feel, she found herself curious about what he would say, how he would try to regain control of a situation that had clearly spiraled beyond his management. "Well," she said to Victoria, straightening her shoulders and lifting her chin with the same regal bearing that had served her earlier in the evening, "this should be interesting." Victoria's smile matched her own. Two women who had just realized they were much stronger than the man who had tried to use them against each other. The business revelation. Marcus approached with the confident stride of a man accustomed to having situations bend to his will. But Sophia could see the uncertainty flickering behind his practiced smile. His perfectly styled hair showed signs of stress. A few strands had escaped their carefully crafted arrangement, and there was a tightness around his eyes that suggested his evening wasn't going according to plan. "There you are," he said, his voice carrying that familiar tone of manufactured warmth that Sophia now recognized as performance rather than genuine affection. "I've been looking everywhere for you, babe." The casual endearment that had once made her feel cherished now sounded possessive, territorial. Sophia noticed how his gaze darted between her and Victoria, trying to assess the situation and determine his next move. "Have you?" Sophia replied evenly. "I wouldn't have thought you'd have time, considering how busy you've been reconnecting." Victoria stepped slightly closer to Sophia, a gesture of solidarity that wasn't lost on any of them. "Marcus," she said coolly, "I believe we finished our conversation." "Victoria, sweetheart, we were just—" "No," Victoria interrupted, her voice carrying a steely edge that contrasted sharply with her earlier vulnerability. "We weren't just anything. We were exactly what I said we were. Finished." Before Marcus could respond, a new voice joined their conversation, this one carrying the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to commanding attention in any room. "I do hope I'm not interrupting anything important." All three turned to find an elegant woman in her mid-40s approaching their small group. She was striking rather than traditionally beautiful, with silver-streaked auburn hair pulled into a sophisticated chignon and intelligent grey eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Her black dress was impeccably tailored but understated, The kind of outfit that whispered rather than shouted its expense. Everything about her projected competence and success. "Eleanor Hayes," she said, extending her hand first to Sophia, then to Victoria, and finally, with noticeably less warmth, to Marcus. "I couldn't help but notice the dynamics at play this evening." Sophia recognized the name immediately. Eleanor Hayes was a legend in venture capital circles, known for her ability to identify promising businesses and the leaders who could make them thrive. Her investment firm had backed some of the most successful startups of the past decade, and her reputation for reading people was as renowned as her business acumen. "Ms. Hayes," Sophia said, accepting the handshake with genuine surprise. "I'm familiar with your work. Your investment in green tech solutions revolutionized sustainable packaging." Eleanor's smile was approving. "Someone who follows the industry? How refreshing. And you are?" "Sophia Chen. I run brand recovery campaigns, helping companies rebuild after setbacks." "Ah, yes, the Building Better campaign for TechFlow. I heard about that through my network. Brilliant work. You turned a potential disaster into a competitive advantage." Eleanor's eyes gleamed with interest. "That kind of strategic thinking is exactly what I've been looking for." Marcus stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable with being excluded from the conversation. "Eleanor, I'm Marcus Rivera from Platinum Investments. We've actually been hoping to set up a meeting to discuss—" "Mr. Rivera," Eleanor said, her tone polite but dismissive. "Yes, I'm aware of your firm. Platinum specializes in quick returns and aggressive tactics, if I recall correctly." "Not quite. My style." The subtle dismissal landed like a slap, and Sophia watched Marcus's jaw tighten with barely contained frustration. He wasn't used to being dismissed, especially not in favor of someone he considered beneath his notice. "Ms. Chen," Eleanor continued, turning her attention back to Sophia, "I've been observing you throughout the evening. The way you handled what could have been a very public embarrassment with such grace and dignity, that tells me something important about your character." Victoria glanced at Sophia with raised eyebrows, clearly intrigued by this unexpected development. "I'm in the process of launching a new initiative," Eleanor explained. "A consulting firm that specializes in crisis management and brand rehabilitation for companies going through major transitions. Not just marketing campaigns, but comprehensive strategic overhauls that address the root causes of corporate problems." Sophia felt her pulse quicken. This was the kind of work she had always dreamed of doing, not just putting bandages on problems, but actually solving them at their source. The position would require someone with your expertise in brand recovery, but also someone with the emotional intelligence to navigate complex interpersonal dynamics under pressure. Someone who can stay calm when others are trying to provoke chaos. Eleanor's gaze was steady and assessing. "Based on what I witnessed tonight, you might be exactly what I'm looking for." "What you witnessed tonight?" Sophia asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. A woman who refused to be diminished by someone else's manipulation. A woman who chose dignity over drama and who somehow managed to turn a potential enemy into an ally. Eleanor's smile included Victoria in its warmth. That kind of leadership can't be taught. It's either there or it isn't. Marcus's face had grown progressively redder during this exchange. "I'm sorry, but what exactly do you think you witnessed? This is a private matter between—" "Between no one," Victoria interjected smoothly. "As I tried to explain, Marcus, we don't have anything to discuss. Our conversation ended when you made it clear I was just a prop in whatever performance you were staging." Eleanor's eyebrows rose slightly, but her expression remained professionally neutral. "Miss Summers, isn't it? The fashion designer. I've seen your work at the Metropolitan Museum's costume exhibitions. Quite innovative." Victoria looked surprised and pleased by the recognition. "Thank you. though I have to say, tonight has reminded me that some designs are better left on the cutting room floor." The pointed comment made Eleanor chuckle, a sound of genuine amusement rather than polite social laughter. "Well said. Ms. Chen, would you be interested in discussing this opportunity further, perhaps over lunch next week?" Sophia felt a surge of excitement that had nothing to do with Marcus or the evening's drama, and everything to do with the possibilities opening before her. This was the kind of career advancement she had been working toward for years, the chance to work at the highest levels of business strategy with someone whose reputation was impeccable. "I would be very interested," she said, her voice steady, despite the way her heart was racing. "Excellent." Eleanor produced an elegant business card from her small clutch purse. "My assistant will be in touch to arrange the details. And Ms. Chen, don't let anyone convince you that tonight was anything other than a demonstration of your professional qualifications. Grace under pressure is the rarest quality in business." As Eleanor moved away to rejoin the main party, Marcus finally found his voice again. "Sophia, we need to talk. This whole thing has gotten completely out of hand." But Sophia was studying Eleanor's business card, already imagining the conversation they would have, the work they might do together. When she looked up at Marcus, she saw him clearly for perhaps the first time, not as the successful, sophisticated man she had fallen for, but as someone whose entire sense of self depended on keeping others small and manageable. "Actually, Marcus," she said, her voice calm and final, "I think everything is exactly as it should be." James appeared at her elbow, having observed the entire interaction from his respectful distance at the bar. "Everything all right here?" he asked, his presence immediately shifting the energy of the group. "Everything is perfect," Sophia replied, and found that she meant it completely. For the first time all evening, she was telling the absolute truth. The final curtain. The transformation was complete, and Marcus Rivera finally understood that he was no longer the director of this particular drama. Standing in the elegant ballroom, surrounded by witnesses to his spectacular miscalculation, he watched the woman he had taken for granted slip away from him with each passing moment, not in the broken, desperate way he had anticipated, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had just discovered exactly how much she was worth. "Sophia, please," he said, his voice carrying a note of desperation that none of them had heard before. The polished investment banker facade was beginning to crack, revealing something smaller and more petulant beneath. "Can we just talk privately, without an audience?" James stepped closer to Sophia, not possessively but supportively. His presence, a quiet reminder that she had choices Marcus had never bothered to acknowledge. Victoria remained at her other side, an unlikely but powerful ally in this moment of reckoning. "I think we've done enough talking for one evening," Sophia replied, her voice steady and sure. She looked at Marcus with clear eyes, seeing him, perhaps, for the first time, without the filter of love or hope or the desperate desire to make things work. "Actually, I think we've done enough talking for a lifetime." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. This wasn't going according to any script he had ever written. Sophia was supposed to fight for him, beg him to choose her, prove that she couldn't live without his attention and approval. Instead, she was standing there like a queen, dismissing a courtier who had forgotten his place. "You can't be serious," he said, his voice rising slightly as panic began to set in. "We've been together for 3 years. You're going to throw that away because of one misunderstanding." "One misunderstanding." Victoria's laugh was sharp and incredulous. "Marcus, you orchestrated this entire evening to manipulate her emotions. You called me specifically to use me as a weapon against her. That's not a misunderstanding. That's calculated cruelty." Several nearby guests had begun to notice the tension, their conversations quieting as they sensed drama unfolding. But instead of the public breakdown Marcus had engineered, They were witnessing something far more damaging to his reputation. A woman of obvious quality and intelligence walking away from him with her dignity intact, while he grew increasingly frantic and desperate. Sophia, think about this logically. Marcus tried again, his voice taking on the patronizing tone he used when he wanted to make her feel foolish for having emotions. You're upset right now, not thinking clearly. In the morning, you'll realize you're overreacting to what was just a conversation with an old friend. A conversation that involved kissing her in front of me to make me jealous, Sophia said calmly. A conversation that was designed to test whether I would humiliate myself, fighting for your attention. A conversation that revealed exactly what kind of man I've been dating for 3 years. Each word was delivered with surgical precision, cutting through Marcus's attempts at manipulation with the sharp blade of truth. Sophia had spent 3 years learning his patterns, understanding his psychology, and now she was using that knowledge not to manage him, but to free herself from him. You know what I realized tonight, she continued, her voice growing stronger with each sentence. I've been so busy trying to be worthy of your love that I forgot to ask whether you were worthy of mine. And Marcus, you're not. The pronouncement landed in the space between them with finality. James smiled slightly, pride evident in his expression, as he watched this remarkable woman claim her own power. Victoria nodded approvingly, recognizing the strength it took to walk away from someone who had convinced you that you needed them. Marcus looked around desperately, as if searching for someone who would validate his perspective, who would agree that Sophia was being unreasonable. But the guests who had gathered to witness this confrontation were looking at him with expressions ranging from pity to disgust. His reputation in their social circle, built on charm and the appearance of success, was crumbling in real time. Fine, he said, his voice turning cold and vindictive in the way it always did when he didn't get what he wanted. Walk away, but don't come crawling back when you realize what you've given up. I'm not going to wait around while you have your little tantrum. The threat that would have once sent Sophia into a panic of apologies and promises to do better now fell completely flat. She looked at him with something that might have been pity. Marcus, she said gently, I'm not having a tantrum. I'm having a revelation. There's a difference. Eleanor Hayes appeared at the edge of their group, having observed enough of the interaction to confirm her earlier assessment. Ms. Chen, she said smoothly, I believe you mentioned you were ready to leave. I'm heading out myself and would be happy to share a car. The offer was clearly more than simple courtesy. It was a rescue, a bridge between the life Sophia was leaving and the one she was choosing. But more than that, it was validation from one of the most successful women in the city that Sophia's choices tonight had been not just personally empowering, but professionally impressive. That's very kind of you, Sophia replied. I'd appreciate that. James stepped forward. I'd be honored to escort you both out, he said, offering his arm to Sophia with old-fashioned gallantry that felt genuine rather than performative. As the four of them, Sophia, James, Victoria, and Eleanor, began to move toward the exit, Marcus made one final desperate attempt to regain control. You'll regret this, he called after them, his voice carrying across the ballroom and drawing even more attention from the other guests. All of you. You have no idea what you're walking away from. Sophia paused at the grand entrance to the ballroom, turning back to look at him one last time. The chandelier light caught the midnight blue of her dress, making her seem to glow within a radiance. She had entered this room hours earlier as Marcus Rivera's girlfriend, diminished and managed and carefully controlled. She was leaving as Sophia Chen, successful in her own right, surrounded by people who valued her mind and respected her choices. Actually, Marcus, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the marble floors and crystal fixtures, reaching every corner of the elegant space, I know exactly what I'm walking away from. And I know exactly what I'm walking toward. She turned and walked out of the ballroom with her head high and her spine straight, flanked by a man who admired her strength, a woman who had chosen sisterhood over competition, and a mentor who saw her potential for greatness. Behind them, Marcus stood alone in the center of the dance floor, finally understanding that the game he had been playing had rules he had never bothered to learn. You couldn't manipulate someone who no longer needed your approval. You couldn't control someone who had remembered their own worth. And you couldn't break someone who had already decided to rebuild themselves into something stronger. The music played on, couples continued to dance, and the party flowed around him as if he had never been its focal point at all. For the first time in his life, Marcus Rivera was exactly where his actions had placed him. Alone with the consequences of treating love like a competition and people like pawns in his personal chess game. Outside, under the stars and city lights, Sophia Chen walked toward her car and her future, surrounded by genuine connection and real opportunity. The last dance of her old life was over, and the first dance of her new one was about to begin, and she had never been more ready to lead.